our questions. We went through some questions yesterday, and we can start with Laura, and I will go ping the others to make sure they know how to get in. But so the reason that I chose the people that I chose is that they represent kind of features, journalism, writ large. Laura is a columnist out of the food and culture area. And so she came at some of these stories from a really more personal angle with a more essay format, and brought a lot of heart and feeling to what she was doing. Sharyn Jackson is a food reporter and has been working that beat for many years. So she came at it really through beat reporting. And just for context, one of the killings, one of the people who got shot by federal officers, Alex Preddy, the site of his killing was on a street that we call Eat Street. So it's full of restaurants and a key part of her beat area. So she had really good sourcing there. And then the third reporter who's going to come on is Reid Forgrave, who doesn't work out of the food and culture area. He works out of what we call the Greater Minnesota team. But he writes with a real features lens and outlook. So we kind of wanted to get that spread so that you guys could ask questions about how they're bringing the craft to this breaking news. Really kind of has felt like an unending story for many months now. And then Allie Shah is the deputy food and culture editor. And she is coming from both a metro and a features background. And I just always find her input and insights fascinating. So that is the group that's going to be here. And I am going to shut up so I can go nudge the two who aren't here to make sure they know what they're doing.
I do
Okay.
see Reid and Sharyn
Oh,
I do,
okay.
and Laura
Okay.
as well. I see Laura too.
and Laura. So
Yeah.
if maybe we'll spotlight you all and you can take it away.
All
I
right.
have
Thanks.
pinned, just quickly, I've pinned this. Is that working for everybody, or do I need to try the spotlight version? Okay, so I think this is pinning is just for me. All right, I'll try the spotlight version. Go ahead.
Okay.
Okay. Thanks so much, and thanks so much for having us and for your interest. Our newsroom has definitely been a whirl constantly, and it never stops, even with today's news of the drawdown. Um, so we are continuing to chase things both from breaking news, but we're always thinking about how to humanize the news, and that's something that food and culture does best. Um, so the first question for Laura and for Sharyn and for Reid is, I know all three of you have experience working as news reporters, as well as doing what people call features. How was your approach to covering this big story similar, and how was it different when you put your features lens on this? How'd you apply your features thinking and your techniques to this story? And maybe we'll start with you, Laura.
Okay, we're just too polite. So, as Sue mentioned, I am a columnist, which does give me the option of inserting my opinions about how things are going here in Minnesota with this operation. But I think, of course, we're all borrowing from just the bedrock of journalism, all the same tenets you would use about just finding the facts, chasing the story. But for us in features, I think because, well, for a variety of reasons, I think we're looking for stories that maybe have a longer tail. So these are stories that it's not just about what happened today, but what are some of the themes that are resonating, the narratives, and how can we humanize those stories? So what started this whole thing, Operation Metro Surge, as the Trump administration calls, is he was very upset about the level of fraud seen in our state, which is a real problem. Um, it was perpetuated by a range of individuals. Most of them were from the Somali American community. And we have recognized that as a state, but he went on to demonize Somalis in Minnesota. And so I mean, he just said just terrible things, calling them garbage, telling them they should go back to where they came from. So in that moment, I relied on the years of experience that I have had reporting on this community, and just like trying to call out what he was saying. Like I think the headline of that column was, "Has Trump ever met a Somali Minnesotan?" Because the things that he was saying was absolutely so disconnected from reality. He said things like they're lazy people, and when you look at the actual stats, they participate in the workforce at a higher rate than the state average. So that was kind of like one of the personal things that I brought to this is just talking about like how I have I mean, just like how all of us, we have, like, there's this narrative that Trump wants you to believe or wants people to believe around the country that, we resent our immigrant neighbors, we resent our Somali American neighbors, but like Somali Americans have been here for 30 years. So I wanted to show stories about how we're just so interconnected. They're our friends, they're our neighbors, our coworkers. So one of the pieces that I wrote, this was back in December, was about a Somali American family of uh, four, I believe, all citizens, and they had been paid visits by ICE agents who were armed, like 5 or 6 carloads at a time, that were banging on her door. And turns out they kept going to the wrong house. They're looking for somebody who didn't live there. So it really, this was early on in the operation, but it really did foreshadow just how I would, some people might say how incompetent ICE was and how ill-trained they were. But was also interesting out of this story was there was a white neighbor who just like did everything to show up for this family. Like he offered to patrol the family. He talked to the state legislator and the police chief to let people know this is a suburban, peaceful neighborhood, but ICE is all over here. So those are the kind of stories that I like to tell. Really taking just a personal example of what's happening and trying to show how it counters a narrative that might be playing out, in Washington.
Thanks, Laura, so much. Reid.
Yeah, I mean, I think when you have such a nonstop, fast-moving news story that goes on for months, we're often writing like, "What happened today?" We have this running blog on our website that, I mean, sometimes it'll be like 20 posts a day, and it's overwhelming, right? And it's a few paragraphs on, here's what Tom Homan said. And then oftentimes we'll be flushing those out in longer sort of breaking news stories. But I think coming at it from a features perspective, and certainly this group of three is not, or we're not the only ones in this newsroom who've done this, but I think it's about thinking thematically, right? Like what's the meaning of thing that happened today? I have a story running this weekend that I'm finishing up right now, knock on wood, I hope. Um, and it's about like editors are like, how do we think of this idea of like the weight of the federal government coming down on Minnesota, not just through ICE agents, but through subpoenas and investigations of state and local Democratic officials, through uh, withholding federal funds, all sorts of things beyond just the most visible thing. And I went into this story very much not knowing what direction that would go, and talked with, I don't know, 15 or 20 people of all political stripes, politicians as well as like everyday folks, and kind of what I came away with from there, beyond just like that initial like topic, is the feeling going on in Minnesota right now is this is about so much more than immigration. It's about so much more than ICE, frankly, on left and on the right. On the right, they talk about this as sort of this lawlessness, this anarchic way of thinking that Democratic officials have encouraged, is what you hear from people on the right. On the left, this is about like fighting creeping autocracy, much more than just about immigration. So I think like, and we'll talk about a couple of these later. I believe this is part of the questioning. There were right after Renee Good's shooting and right after Alex Preddy's shooting, I did sort of like a mood of the state type story. And I think for those stories, you really got to try to get past like, something happened and everyone's scared and mad. It's like, what does this really mean? And I think that can be, I mean, you talk to as many people as you can in a short period of time, and then you try to synthesize it, and you sort of like step back from it, take a breath, and you're like, okay, what did I hear today? And I know with the Renee Good shooting, it was about like sort of this American split screen where it's like, every big news event gets filtered between our political lenses, and you can look at that video and you can see what you want to see. So it was really a story about just like political tribalism. So I think that's really important in moments like this. Like, yes, we're this whole news organization has been saying, here's what happened today, here's the context of it, here's what might be happening tomorrow. But to take a step back and think like, what is this really about? What are people really feeling in their gut right now?
Thanks so much, Reid. So Sharyn,
Yeah.
thanks for joining too. Um, Sharyn's got a little bit of a camera issue, but just so you know, Sharyn is has also been hard charging on this story, attacking it from many angles. She covers restaurant news, dining news, and the restaurant community is deeply impacted by what's been going on. Sharyn, can you tell us a little bit about how you applied your features thinking to this story?
Yeah, and yeah, sorry, I don't know what's going on with my camera, and I even did makeup right before this and everything. So bummer. Um, yeah, I think well, your first question before was about our like kind of backgrounds in news and how we kind of can go in and out of news and features. And I think Reid or Laura, someone had mentioned about the live blog. And so when this all kind of got really big and heavy and fast, we started producing this live blog that really everyone in the newsroom was a part of. No matter what beat you were on, you had something to contribute there. And it was just a steady, quick stream of news coming out. And for me, who covers restaurants, like I was seeing, a bunch of restaurants were posting the day that Renee Good was killed. They were posting, we're going to close early, or we're going to provide free community meals today, or and we started seeing these and getting those on the blog. And then I think my both being in features and having a beat gives me the opportunity to sort of look at the overview and the bigger picture of what's happening in the restaurant community, like on that day. And so realizing it's, I could write 5 posts on this live blog, but that's now I'm seeing a trend and I'm seeing a story emerge. And so able to take that step back and say, okay, there's actually a story here about how restaurants are responding right now, both like today, on this day of breaking news, but also then just because I know the people in the restaurant community as sources and talk to them a lot, starting to hear things fit together and hear things again and again from different sources and realize, okay, this is actually a bigger story about how restaurants are changing right now. Like multiple restaurants are locking their doors and letting people in one by one and sort of vetting who's there at the door, or they're closing the dining room completely and switching to takeout, and able to see these bigger trends. So moving past the kind of daily quick fire stuff and then actually getting to the bigger picture.
Yeah, I think all those news instincts you guys have served well, and then just the way you've been able to go after the human, because it's such a deeply human story going forward. Laura, I wanted to ask you about one column in particular, which was the one that you wrote about your parents who are immigrants and how they have started carrying their passports around with them when they leave the home. Deeply personal, took a risk putting yourself out there in such a vulnerable way. Talk us through kind of how you decided that you wanted to go that route.
Well, actually, Allie, you came to my desk, right? That was part of it. I guess I was sort of puzzling over how to write about this topic because not being on the hard news team, you're always looking for different ways you can just carve out what you want to say and how it could be different from what, all the good work that other people in the room are doing. And you and another colleague were just talking about how you started to carry your passports around.
Mhm.
And you actually were the one that told me how to upload your passport to Apple Wallet, which I didn't even know you could do. And it got me thinking, like, there's so much terrible things happening in Minnesota at that time. And like every day, literally, you just wake up and there'd be another awful thing. Like either
Oh, can you?
tragedy. So a lot of terrible things were happening. So the idea of us having us immigrants or even non-immigrants who look foreign, feeling like we had to carry our passports around seemed like it was kind of paling in comparison to the truly traumatic things. But I'm glad that you did convince me to do that column because yeah, I mean, it sucks. It sucks to think that like this document that you often thought was like a joyful thing to carry around and look at all the cool places you traveled, you're now carrying as a precaution to make sure that a federal agent knows that you actually belong in this country. So I did, you know, I'm glad I wrote it because I think it did resonate with a lot of people. It's like more of a pervasive fear, a constant fear that was like always on people's mind if you're a person of color in this state.
What kind of feedback? Just
Oh,
curious. What
are
kind
you
of feedback
muted
have
or
you
did I
gotten?
just lose you? It's probably me.
Oh,
Hold on a second.
okay.
Okay.
Can you hear it?
Yeah, sorry. It does
Oh,
that.
no worries.
It's great for interviews, my technology here.
So I'm just curious, what kind of response did you get from that column?
Oh, that was really cool too to see because, like I said, you never know what's going to resonate with people. And I just thought, like, "Oh, I hope I don't come off as tone deaf, you know." But I got lots of responses. Everything from friends who are like resharing the column, people who are vouching for me. Like, which is just funny because I personally feel like I do have a lot of privilege. I speak English, I'm college educated, but like my white friends are like, she's a soccer mom, she's a band watching mom, like she belongs here. Like they're getting on their speeches on Facebook. I think the best or the most I guess memorable comments I get was a friend who's Hmong who shared this on Facebook. So the Hmong people, in case people don't know the history there, but they assisted the CIA during what was known as the Secret War in Laos during the Vietnam War, and they were known for everything. But like one of the things that they did was they rescued downed American pilots. So my Hmong friend said, I told someone recently that while I miss my parents deeply, a part of me is grateful they did not live to see this, meaning the ICE presence in Minnesota. They would have been heartbroken to witness this version of America, a place where safety feels conditional and belonging requires proof. My father once told me how his unit lost nearly every man trying to save a downed American pilot. He believed in this country. He believed that sacrifice meant something. I'm sorry, Dad. We will keep fighting even though we have to carry papers, and it is breaking our hearts.
Mm.
So I
Wow.
thought that one just
Wow.
moved me the most because, yeah, I mean, people who are basically heroes or the
Mhm.
children of heroes who've literally saved Americans during wartime are now feeling like second-class citizens.
Yeah. Um, that's really powerful stuff. And it just again kind of underscores, I think, how doing things from an angle that is unexpected is sometimes the stuff that has broken through the most in this coverage. I mean, just even the small personal tale. Oh, yay, Sharon's
Yay!
here
She
in
shared it.
living color.
Mhm.
That's good. Well, it's probably a good time to go to you, Sharyn. Um, yeah, so you definitely, I mean, have seen it from so many angles. You were saying something to us yesterday that I thought was really interesting about just kind of how you've been kind of immersing all of this, even when it doesn't scream, I'm writing a story about the surge. You talk a little bit about how that's been permeating your guys' coverage and the lens you're using for your stories.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a big thing with my beat because like people also come to the food pages for some relief from the news,
Yeah.
but you also can't avoid the news. And so I think something that we're able to do as features writers is kind of do both, like both write about the news and not write about the news at the same time. And so when things really got heated up here, we started, we have a weekly column that we do called the 5 Best Things We Ate, and it's just things that our team pulls based on all the eating that we do all week. And some of it's in pursuit of other news stories, or some of it's just with our families, but we come together and do a little survey of the best things we ate. And we started doing all immigrant owned restaurants in 5 Best every week. And we didn't make a statement at the top of the column, we're now featuring immigrant owned restaurants or these cuisines. We just did it. And I think that was one way to both provide that relief of like people love our column because it's just fun and it's nice to scroll through and see the pretty pictures of the food, but also we know a lot of people are asking, how can I help? Who can I support? What are the immigrant-owned like corridors where there's a lot of these restaurants? And so we're providing that service too at the same time that is very news-based, while also giving a little bit of that featurey delight. Another thing that we did was after Alex Preddy was killed, and you mentioned about Eat Street. So he was killed on this very dense corridor of immigrant-owned restaurants called nicknamed Eat Street. Our team spent a day out there eating. I don't know, we went to like 13 or 14 restaurants and just got something in every place and compiled a whole thing. And so that week's five best, instead of five best, it was like the 12 great things we ate on Eat Street. But it was pretty amazing because East Street was really crowded and really busy. This is just like 2 or 3 days after Alex Preddy was killed, and there's tons of media there. There's tons of mourners there. But the restaurants were pretty much, except for the couple that were like within steps of where the memorial site was, the rest were pretty quiet. And we were, of all the media that was out on the streets, we were the only ones that were dining in at the restaurants on that day. And I think we were able to tell a really unique story that no one else could tell about what it actually feels like to be there, what it feels like for the restaurant operators and the staff to be there. Like they're also dealing with their own fears. And then this like horrific thing happened outside their door, and some of them opened up their restaurants to help protesters on the day of the killing, when there was like tear gas and flashbangs flying and everything. And so they're really at the center of this place that's very powerful. And that duality of like they're also here to serve you and serve you this beautiful food and make you feel joy and happy while you're dining. And then you walk outside and you see that memorial and it like hits you in the face. Um, by the nature of what we do and being in the features side of things, I think we could share a little bit more of that voice and observation. It's not like a critical lens exactly, but like kind of the way a critic would apply to the news of the day and kind of tell you this is what this feels like. And it was also reported out with these operators about what they're going through. So
Yeah, it's amazing. And just we've had so much national media descending on our town too. But I think the sourcing and the relationships that you and your team, Sharyn in particular, have has really helped a lot. I think to open doors, I think that other people probably couldn't have gotten the
yeah.
way you've had people open up. Yeah. Um, for everybody on the panel, for the, in the past 5 years, Minnesota, I don't have to tell you guys this, we've all kind of lived through this. It's been the center of so much seismic news. We had, of course, George Floyd's murder by police. We had the political assassination last summer of a Minnesota lawmaker. We have had the mass school shooting at the Annunciation Catholic School and Church. Now these deadly encounters with ICE agents during Operation Metro Surge. Did anything from your guys' past experiences living through this in this community, reporting on it, any of that inform or help you guys as you approached covering this latest tragedy?
I think part of it is just like recognizing that stories that are this big have such a long tail. Like we were as an institution writing about George Floyd's murder and the reaction to it for years. I'm still writing about it.
Yeah.
And not just like, hey, let's do an anniversary story, but just like it was the only story that really mattered in this newsroom, certainly for I mean, I have to take that back. There was COVID's going on, and presidential election 2020 was a little chaotic, but 2026 is thinking about saying, hold my beer. But I think it's just like recognizing like there's the immediate story, and then there's the long. We're going to be writing about this story certainly for the rest of 2026, and not just the you know you know trying to figure out the numbers and the economic impact, but the human stories from this. So I'm already thinking like, what are the stories that we can tell a week from now, a month from now, 6 months from now? And also like recognize, and this is a big Annunciation church shooting where there were two kids killed, a third one nearly killed, and then like I think 3 dozen injured. This happened a few blocks from my house, and it kind of consumed my fall and into the early winter. And I'm still writing a bunch of stories about it, often with Allie. Um, but one of my approaches there was, you get to know a community and you hear about, one person or one group of people. And sometimes it's like, hey, we need to write this story right now because this is important, or there's something that's being talked about at the legislature. But a lot of times with these feature stories, I think there's so much value in saying, hey, I'm Reid. I know like a week ago you just went through the most traumatic moment of your life, and you've been consumed with national media, and it's awful, and I want to tell your full story, but I recognize this may not be the time. And then checking in every week, every
Yeah.
month, being a human first. And I think that's really important here. And that's how you get those stories that are beyond just here's what happened today, but really like the human toll of these tragedies, having patience, having humanity, and just, I think you can tell the better story when people have a little bit of separation. I mean, obviously, that's not always the case. I was interviewing uh, a neighbor in my backyard 3 hours after that shooting who was a witness to it. Like that was something that needed out that day. But you keep in touch with these people, and I think as they've like become more at peace with this tragedy they've been through, they can both like be able to talk about it in a constructive way, and like have also like already formed the meaning of that moment in their head.
Yeah, absolutely. What do you think, Sharyn?
Yeah, for me, I think that I recognized pretty early into this ice surge that this was feeling a lot like what it felt like to report on restaurants at the beginning of COVID.
Hmm.
But it was happening much faster because, just as restaurants they learned a lot about continuing to operate and pivot through a crisis. So they were kind of ready to go and make some of the same changes. And I started to see these patterns emerging pretty fast. And in fact, they were just pulling, it was like the COVID playbook. They were just, going right back to the same things that they were doing then. And I had like muscle memory of reporting those stories. Like it was the same thing. It was like, oh, this place is going to close or change the hours or go to takeout or whatever. And
You had your own COVID playbook.
yeah, exactly. And
Yeah.
and honestly, and it felt the same too, even talking to my sources. Like I getting on the phone with them to ask them how they're doing. And you don't even have to say anything. It's just like, how are you? And then it's like the floodgates come out and these people are panicking and they're in total crisis and they don't know if their business is going to make it or if they're safe. And and you just listen to them for 45 minutes and then think, oh, how do I like process this to write this and share this story? But I also need to like hang up the phone and like maybe take a quick cry because like that was a lot. And they just, and that was exactly what it felt like in those COVID days. And it was like happening again. And it was like, how are we back here? And maybe that's the thing about living in the city that has just seems to be major news crisis after major news crisis. It's like, how are we back here?
Yeah, absolutely. Laura, what are your thoughts?
I think just having Minnesota being at the epicenter of all these tragedies within a short period of time really reinforces the need to have stories of hope and stories of action that could inspire other people. We just had a piece that ran yesterday and this was done by a news reporter, by an education reporter. So it just goes to say, like, just the way that all of us have kind of become breaking news reporters, the news side has really become features reporters, you know? And this one reporter did such a great job covering, I think the headline was, here's the unexpected part of the Minnesota resistance, suburban soccer moms, or the soccer moms of Signal was the name of it. And just how these moms were stepping up, like all the skills that they have perfected with organization, spreadsheets for summer camp signups, and ordering jerseys, that kind of thing. They're now being used to like feed these people in hiding, these immigrants in hiding who haven't left their homes to go to the grocery store, or their kids are not even attending school. So I mean, when you read a story like that, and I read the story like several times yesterday, and I just was like, I just had a tear in my eye because um, we're gonna need more of these stories, you know? I mean, like,
Mm.
I, I think with all the terrible things that have happened, we've all heard about news fatigue, and the human brain and body is not meant to sustain this much terrible news. But
Mm.
if you can be part of something that can make a difference and help show the way for others who are just having that restless, nervous energy, I mean, that is a form of resilience. And even when I'm writing about terrible things, it's easier to work than not work because it feels like you're doing something. As journalists, we can't protest. We can't like, well, I mean, I guess I can because I'm a columnist, but I wouldn't protest if my bosses are listening. But I mean, I can share my opinions, but a lot of people in the newsroom can't. But we can write about it. We can make a difference, and we can show people the light. So I think that's some of the takeaways that I have from just witnessing and reporting on one tragedy after another. Oh, also public service stories are so important too. So
Mhm.
like as a parent, one thing that has come up often is how do you talk to your kids about this? So I did a story after Annunciation shooting about like how do you talk to I mean, sadly that story has been written a million times, but
Mhm.
it is what people needed, I think, in that moment. And I think same thing with this immigration surge. I don't know if there was a script really yet written. So one of my colleagues, Rachel Hutton, wrote that piece. How do you talk to your kids about what is ICE? What are they doing? You know, how do how do you talk to your kids about the things that they're seeing on TV or even witnessing in social media or hearing from their friends about how it's affected, their families?
I
That's a
think
good point.
jumping off what Laura was just saying, that idea of like when you're a journalist, you can't. It's like you're a little bit less than fully human,
Mm.
where you want to have feelings one way or the other, and you can't express them at least in a public fashion. And I found like on the day that Renee Good was killed and on the day that Alex Preddy was killed, I was like, I have to go down there. I
Mm.
wasn't writing about, in the immediate aftermath of Renee Good's killing. I wasn't writing about it, but I went down to the scene a few hours later and I was just like, I got to take this in because that I could, the worst thing I could do for my mental health and for my journalism is to sit at home and fret and worry and brood. And then when Alex Preddy was killed, it was a Saturday morning, and I was still I made a big breakfast for my family. I made these like breakfast bowls, and I was halfway through it, and I see this headline, and I seriously was like about to throw up. I was sick to my stomach, and I was for several hours, at least a couple hours. But I'm like, told my wife, I'm like, I'm canceling plans today. I'm not going to coach the 9-year-old basketball team. I have to go into the office because and I drove past the scene
Mm.
just to like just to like I was like, I have to like fully feel this, even though I know I can't be out there protesting one way or the other. So like in a way, like this is what we can do in a moment that feels so helpless. Bearing witness, I think, is like that's the way we do something.
Yes, unfortunately, we've had a lot of practice at that in our town. Um, and Sharon, did you have any more that you wanted to add?
No, I just wanted to say too that like I sometimes also feel a little guilt like compared to some of our news reporters who are out kind of at the front lines. And
Mm.
I mean, at this point, like I'd have to get trained on this like protective equipment if I did, want to volunteer and go out and report on the front lines. But just what they have been putting themselves through to do that. But also we do get called on from time to time. I mean, as a newsroom, like we all have the skills and with Annunciation, for example, I was pulled out that day just to as a news reporter because I think it was the end of August. A lot of people were on vacation. We were a little short-staffed, and I wasn't even in the office that day, and I got called in, and then I found out that Rohan Preston, our theater critic, was dispatching from the hospital as kids were being brought in, and he was writing those stories. And of course, us being in features and covering things like the arts and food and being columnists and being able to kind of tell those stories really beautifully, I think is a special skill we have. But also we have the news ability as well to be out there on those days and so just that covering Annunciation as a news reporter was, I only did it for one day. I know Reid has been really following that, but that was a really, really hard day. But also that, like you were just saying, Reid, there's something also very cathartic about being at the center of those moments that everyone wants to know about and these crises that really impact our entire community and getting to bear that witness. It's a special thing that a privilege that we have to be able to do that.
Yes, absolutely. Reid, I wanted to, we'll give a little time for questions here. I think we'll be wrapping up with this part of it. But Reid, I just wanted to ask you a little bit about a story that you had done that was a sweeping story, but you used a microcosm. You used the town of Wilmer to tell it. This is a community that is rich in both immigrants, but it also is a place that has politically conservative. Can you tell us more about kind of how that story came to be and
Yeah.
yeah.
If anybody read this story, it's probably just a few paragraphs in the story, which we broke out at my editor's behest as a blog item, and then as a separate story that sort of went viral because it was about some ICE agents who had lunch at a Mexican restaurant in this town of 20,000, and then came back later that night and arrested the owners of the two owners of the restaurant and a worker, which I was just thinking of this as like a very illuminating detail in this one story about a small town grappling with conflicted emotions on ICE, and my editor had the foresight to say, "Hey, that's a story on its own." But this town, there are a lot of these towns. I mean, not just in Minnesota, but certainly across the Midwest, and I would presume the country, um, that are like these incredibly diverse small towns. Wilmer's fascinating, town of 21,000, 40% non-white, in a county that voted two-thirds for Donald Trump. It's actually the turkey producing capital of America, Candy-Ojai County. And the reason that I went there is because I had heard from people who live there that there was an increasing ICE presence in town, and I work for the greater Minnesota team, so I'm often writing about a lot of small towns. But the reason that I knew this was because, one, I worked with a photographer named Liz Flores, who is kind of the heart and soul of our immigration coverage at this paper. She's absolutely remarkable. And she had heard and I had heard. But the reason that we had heard this is because we had been to Wilmer for two bigger stories in summer and fall. We knew this immigrant, we certainly didn't know this stuff was going to happen, but we knew this was going to come to Minnesota at some point. And we're like, what's a way to write about this? So one story went to this county fair. We had originally thought, let's go to all the county fairs that have jails that take ICE detainees, and let's write about the complicated. We ended up just going to this one county and focusing on it. And then we went back there a lot in fall and wrote a bigger story about this high school soccer team where, in this incredibly diverse town, you have two white kids, and then the rest of the soccer team is immigrants. We followed them through their season, really got to know this town at a deeper level. And I think, look, sometimes something happens like the Annunciation shooting, where you can't expect some big awful news to happen like that. But sometimes it happens, like these ICE shootings, or frankly, like George Floyd. There have been lots of issues with Minneapolis police in the years leading up to George Floyd. We didn't know that all of that would happen, but I know plenty of reporters in this newsroom who, myself included, who were trying to write stories about the meaning of Minneapolis police. So this was a story that we sort of prepared for. And I think having those one-on-one connections with real people, having a little bit of trust built up is so key when a story like this happens. So we ended up going there and just writing about the complicated politics of this rural town with tons of immigrants, talking to Republicans, talking to Democrats, talking to immigrants, talking to everyday Main Street business owners. And I think wrote like what was like a more complicated story than a lot of stories about this issue, because we because of Liz Flores, the photographer, we were in a home with an immigrant family from Honduras, I believe, and they hadn't left their home in days. High school kid who's just like, fine, I guess I go back to my room. I can't even leave my house. Really sad. But I think if you focus just on that, it's a really sad story. When you focus on the bigger, how does this community that's so different than the Twin Cities, how does this cope with this surge in ICE activity? It brings like a little more nuance to it.
Yeah, that was definitely one of our more memorable pieces. I think we'd like to invite others in if you have questions for the panel or any questions about Minneapolis and what it's like right now. No?
I have a question for you all.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. How does it feel to be covering these major events alongside journalists from like large national media outlets who don't live in Minnesota all the time, who are only coming into town temporarily? Are there like pros and cons of having them there working alongside you? And what does this experience with this dynamic teach you about the power of local journalism?
It's a great question. I will say one of
We
the New York Times reporters actually works in our office. So on a different area.
someone told me the New York Times had at one point had 20 reporters here. Like I'm assuming this was a couple weeks ago. So it's like they sort of have a pop-up local newsroom too. I think it's just like that the belief and like the reality that we're here for the long haul, right? We're yes, we're going to write the thing that happened today, but we're also going to be here 3 months from now and a year from now. I know that certainly with the Annunciation story, that was something that right from the beginning people recognized. Like there were, down the street from my house, there were CNN cameras and a dozen TV cameras that set up shop in the fish and chips restaurant by the grocery store, and they were there for a few days. Huge lights, like Klieg lights, that were on at night there. But everyone knew that was going to go away, and that like there would be another tragedy somewhere else. And that was really just about, I don't want to call it sensational, but it's sort of like, okay, we're here today and then we're gone tomorrow. And I think there's so much value in local news that's here for the long haul, that may not have the reach of the New York Times or of CNN, but I think has much more like depth and humanity, and just that's like the reality of this, that like with tragedies like this, they just go on for such a long time. When the acute crisis passes, there's still like a community that's grappling with how their lives change during this. And like, I feel like that is what we are here to document just as much as what's happening today, what chaos is happening.
To add to that, I think it's also like if you have a beat, which I do, like it's beat reporting. I've seen New York Times and other outlets do really great stories about the restaurants here and about what East Street is about and what it means to our community. But we're seeing unexpected stories that no one else is going to see. So an example is that amid all of this, the James Beard Foundation came out with its list of semifinalists for the awards, and we had quite a few restaurants named to that list, and that's always a big news story for us. And we, right away we get it up online, and these are all the Minnesota semifinalists, and then we call all the restaurant owners and the chefs and talk to them about it. And right away, we noticed something was different. Like that's a story that any outlet would have, right? Like, here's all the semifinalists. But I called one of the chefs and got him on the phone. And I'm like, I know it's a tough time right now, but here's some good news. Like, what do you think? And the first thing he said to me was, I don't care. I've been in a meeting all morning trying to figure out if we can stay open another week or two. And he's like, make sure that get that out into the national media that like these are James Beard semifinalists and we don't know if we're going to survive. And we had a completely different angle on the story that any publication would have anywhere about these major restaurant awards. So we had our first day story of here's who was nominated, and then the next day we came out with the story that I think was posted in the chat here, which is that these chefs are not celebrating right now. They are going through a much harder time because of this ice surge and the impact it's having on the restaurant community. So I think it's just, knowing these sources, them feeling comfortable being able to talk that transparently with us at this point, That's something that a first time, someone who's calling one of these shots for the first time would never get that.
There are a couple questions in the chat, but before we go to that, Laura, I don't know if you have anything to answer on that, but I also want to get to Esther's question. But Laura,
Sure,
do you
go
have
ahead.
anything you
Well, I'll just say that,
go ahead?
like the have now, they're really gonna be an advantage for you. I mean, it's been great to see all the national media come here, and I am very grateful for the reporting because I think the world does need to know what's happening here and what has happened. And I have admired some of the reporting that's come out of the New York Times and other national publications because they're able to bring such like a step back lens, which kind of like for people who are exhausted with the news, it is nice to just have that narrative, like, okay, this is their story of the day on what's happening in Minneapolis, as opposed to so much of, our content. But our readers are Minnesota readers mostly. They're going to come to us for like every development, as they should. But yeah, I mean, just the knowledge that you have about your beats, the people that you know, even your Facebook feed is going to be filled with way more relevant stuff because it's coming from people who live in Minnesota. So just know that you do have quite a bit of an advantage when you are competing, I guess, with other media flying into town.
For sure. Esther, please go ahead.
Oh, thank you. This has been such a great discussion. You guys have done such amazing work. I'm in Oakland, and we had a moment in the fall when we thought that there was going to be a mobilization happening. It ended up dissipating due to a deal with the mayor of San Francisco, but we're kind of very consciously trying to prepare both in terms of training, safety training, equipment. But just editorially, like if you could wind back time and have some space to plan for the coverage that you ended up doing during this period, what kind of planning or preparation would you do?
That's a really good question. I mean, I think one of the things that's been um, most frustrating for us is feeling like we've tried a lot to um, be in contact with ICE and to try to get answers to questions we have, the public has about it. And we've been stonewalled a lot. And I think some of that has to do with the fact that we have a really able interim immigration reporter here. But I think for us, I think my lesson for all of this is we really need to have make those inroads before a crisis and being able to now that like you said, I mean, we knew that Chicago, oh, sorry, we have a building with energy conservation lights. So um yeah, so I mean, I think I would knowing that like they had been in Chicago before and then then all of a sudden now that they were in Minneapolis, I think, yeah, any city now should be thinking about trying to get inroads now and kind of kick those doors in now. I would make that a big part of your planning.
Don't
Yeah.
have your immigration
Oh, go ahead.
reporter leave. I say don't have your immigration reporter leave the paper in June
Yeah, that's true.
2025.
Yeah.
This like really talented immigration
Yeah,
reporter.
we had a
Uh,
great immigration reporter, and she left to go research a book that she's working on in India. I just heard from her the other day, and she's like, "Ah, I can't believe I'm missing this story." Um, but also, we created an ICE pop-up team, so that's been in place. Every morning we have an 8:30 meeting. That's what are we covering today? What's coming in the next day? And it's pulled from all departments. I mean, Sharyn wasn't lying. Our theater critic just wrote a story about the space between evangelical MAGA and what's happening here with the immigrant community. I mean, people are being pulled in from every corner of the newsroom. So if there's anything you don't already have in place for cross-departmental cooperation, that's another good thing to work on. And people like Sharyn can work within her beat, but other people, can't. And of course, the stories touched everything from schools to neighborhoods to greater Minnesota to, not so much some of the things that we cover regularly, arts, but it's everywhere. It's a story for the whole newsroom. And then it really becomes coordination. So anything you can do to put plans for coordinating the coverage into place so people aren't stepping on each other. We also very quickly, and maybe somebody already said this when I was out trying sorry, Sharyn, I went running in person to look for you. We are covering the story primarily, mainly every day through a live blog. So having your live blog chops up and knowing how to run the live blog, knowing who's going to man the keys, all that stuff, was really important for us too.
Very good. Um, I know there was at least one question in the chat. We have just about 6 minutes left here. And I don't know, did you answer this, Reid? Your point about holding on to stories, sources for what they can be told best. How do you have that conversation with your editor?
Yeah, I mean, like I remember that we had like a staff-wide meeting maybe like the week after the Annunciation shooting where I kind of made that point like our role is like yeah, we're a news organization. We should be fast when we need to be. But like our goal shouldn't be to be like the first one to name a victim. I think our goal should be like to do like the best long-term work for our community. Not advocating one way or the other. I mean, with the Annunciation shooting, it wasn't, there were, of course, politics of gun violence that were immediately a point of it, but it was like just a terrible, awful tragedy. It's not like anyone was like, oh, I see the other side of it. But I think it's like, we should be advocating for our community, right? And I think telling editors, look, this could be a good story now, but this could be a great story a week from now or a month from now. I think if you're able to deliver the goods, I think that editors can see that, right?
Right.
Yeah, and I think Reid, you can't brag about yourself, but I can. Reid brings really good storytelling, human storytelling chops, long form narrative. So when he's pitching a story, his editor is listening in a different way because he's proven that he can have a narrative flow to his story and he can make it emotional. He can sit with some discomfort on the part of his subjects. He can sit with people who are grieving. He can, and he can get a story out of that. So if you're able to, well, I should plug the SFJ conference since I'm on the board too. But, if you can just sort of try to find the space where you are thinking like that true features person that you are, how do I connect? Why not just like why will people care about this? What is the real true reason that someone's going to care about your story? And if you can sort of make your pitch, putting that reader in front and showing why someone should care, I think that goes, I mean, as an editor, that goes a long way with me. Also, if you've done it before and you've proven that you can do it, so start trying to get those stories. I'm sure most people here are very experienced, but I do see a couple newbies in here who I happen to know. Hi, Ashton. But also a very great features writer. But if you can start getting those stories in your clips range, that's helpful too. I saw somebody else ask the question of what stories readers have been most interested in out of all this. I think people in Minneapolis have been incredibly interested in these stories of resistance. I think the national media has been really interested in that. I think when Renee Good's wife said, they had guns, we had whistles, it kind of was the encapsulating quote around this kind of David and Goliath story that's really captured people's imaginations. I also think any kind of investigative thing that we've done and any news that we've broken, people have been really interested in. And
I think that the photography has been just outstanding, and those
yeah,
are the things that have gotten a lot of national attention, like Rich Song's now
yeah,
iconic picture of the protester in prone position
right.
getting sprayed chemical
Yeah.
irritant in the face.
Yeah, and none of that is to discount. I mean, people loved Laura's personal column. People loved when the food team went out and went to Eat Street and said, "Here's 12 things you want to help. You want to help out. go eat. Here's what you should have, here's what you can have, and painted this really evocative picture. I think, Reid, your story on what that you did with other reporters, of course, what are the conditions in Whipple right now? That was
Mhm.
a very popular one. I haven't, I, we track our metrics every day, and so we know what stories each day are doing well. Honestly, I don't think any of us have taken a beat yet to kind of take that step back to have real clear, like this bucket, this bucket, this bucket. But those are just some of the top line ones.
Any other questions? Oh, go
Yeah.
ahead, Sharyn.
Well, just one other interesting thing is that at the beginning of like all of this happening, we were also told like while we're working on these things to keep doing what we're already doing because there's going to be a need for counter programming. And like sometimes that counter programming seems to not break through at all, but other times it does. I mean, we just had a list of the best wings for the Super Bowl, and it felt really kind of awkward to be like busy writing a wings list amid everything going on, but that got like huge numbers actually for us right at this moment with all the other news happening. And so I think there's sort of like what you want to be doing, but also sort of what you still need to be doing as folks that cover kind of the more lifestyle areas.
It's a really good point.
We
Right.
are at time. So it looks like there's maybe another question here about particular community organization that has surprised you with newfound advocacy and activism. And if you want to send that to us in an email, we can probably share it out with folks as part of their registration here today. Thank you so much for your time. Laura,
Thank
you
you.
want to say anything? This was wonderful. Really
No,
lovely to hear
thank
from
you.
other writers and journalists and about how you're managing all this and you're all doing great work.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thanks for
you.
having us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks for doing this, guys. See ya.
Yeah.
See ya.
Good luck.
Trying to